محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا من فضلك علما. So we decided, inshallah, every person that ultimately wants to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this has to be based on the method that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself prescribed, in which the Prophet himself prescribed, and that is done through the three objectives: the objective of knowledge, of spiritual purification, and of da'wah, calling people to Allah or connecting people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the focus of these lessons, inshallah, are going to be on more specifically the knowledge aspect of all three objectives: the dhikr, recitation of Quran, Qiyamul Layl, etc. But there's also a theory that goes with that, over and above the knowledge aspect of spiritual purification, which are the books that deal with how to purify the heart from the spiritual diseases. And then the pure knowledge aspect are all our Islamic sciences which we need to learn, starting with, first of all, fiqh, understanding our ibadah, how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then going on to the other Islamic sciences, which gives us a greater understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala organized the Sharia and what He wants from us in our life, and how we ought to worship Him, and how we ought to get close to Him. So today is just an introduction into what we're going to be doing with regards to the three objectives. There are different books that are done on each of the different levels. And so when it comes to the knowledge aspect, we usually start with the fiqh. And the fiqh is an understanding of how we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how to make wudu, how to purify ourselves, how to perform our salah, the conditions of salah. When is our salah acceptable, when is it not acceptable? What breaks our salah, what are the things that nullify salah, etc., etc. So the first book that we usually start with is the Risalatul Jami'ah of Habib Ahmad bin Zayd al-Habashi. This is a primer, and there are many primers that have been written, but this one in particular is very blessed. And Habib Ahmad bin Zayd al-Habashi was a student of Imam al-Haddad, and he had come to Imam al-Haddad when he had really reached very, very high stages in spirituality and in knowledge. And so when he came to Imam al-Haddad, he had already completed what we would say your knowledge path. But he came and he sat at the feet of Imam al-Haddad even for 40 years. And only after that did he go on his own and begin teaching on his own. And he went to a place outside Tarim, in a place called Hawta, and he established his own masajid and his own gatherings. So the Risalatul Jami'ah, in the beginning, when inshallah we start the book tomorrow, he makes dua and he says that this book that he has written is based on the books of Imam al-Ghazali, mostly, and that whoever studies this book and practices what lies in this book, his dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that such a person will become of the scholars of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, both internally and externally. Meaning he will gain spiritual knowledge internally and he will gain external knowledge just if he practices on this book. What we would hear from some of our mashayikh like Habib Ali al-Mashhur, he would say that if Imam al-Mahdi had to come in our times, the first thing he would prescribe for people is to read this book of Habib Ahmad Zayd al-Habashi. Why? Is because before the books of fiqh used to be written, they would deal purely with just the rules of worship. But Habib Ahmad Zayd al-Habashi, he combined in this book the aqidah, which is the correct belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the fiqh rulings, which has always been written about, and at the end, the purification of the heart, the spiritual diseases that need to be purified. So it's a very comprehensive book for beginners to begin with. All of the Islamic sciences within all three objectives, as we spoke about. So whether we're going to be doing fiqh or hadith or tafsir or mustalah al-hadith, which is hadith nomenclature or the science of how hadith was narrated, or the sciences of the Quran, no matter what sciences we choose to be doing, there are 3 levels. There's a beginner level, there's an intermediate level, and there's a advanced level. The beginner level entails just learning what the masail are, what are the rulings. So for example, when you have to make wudu, you have to do this, that, this, and that. Your wudu breaks if this and that happens. Just learning what the rulings are. This is the beginner level. So all the books or the primers are written just with the rulings. So they'll tell you the conditions of salah are so many. What are they? This, that, and the other. And you have to go through all the beginner texts to be able to get a basic foundation. If you come to the intermediate, they would then tell you the proof for this ruling. So if we say wudu breaks because of this, what is the ruling? Or what is the proof? Sorry. This verse of the Quran, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when such and such a thing happens, you need to make wudu. Or the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that mentions, if such and such a thing happens, then. So all of the proofs for the rulings. And then at the advanced levels, you learn the illah. You learn how the ulama derive those rulings or those understandings from the proofs. And the common person doesn't need to learn the advanced level, but what is required for him and what is obligatory for him. And the Prophet said, طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيضَةٌ عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ وَمُسْلِمَةٍ. And some narrations say, طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيضَةٌ عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ. But here it would mean male and female. Seeking knowledge is obligatory upon each and every single believer, each and every single Muslim. Obligatory meaning it is as obligatory as your salah. Do you not read salah any days? Is there a day that we cannot read salah? Is there a day we cannot read salah? So there should not be a day in which we are not learning knowledge, the obligatory knowledge. Meaning, if we do not yet know the obligatory knowledge of how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how to pay our zakah, what are the rulings of fasting, how to go for hajj, what are the rulings with regards to marriage, with regards to business, if we are involved in all of those things, okay, means we are not fulfilling an obligatory act. This could mean that we are also living in sin. If it is obligatory upon us to learn by the command of the Prophet ﷺ, and we are not doing that, that means that we are actually living in sin. I'm not saying we are committing sin, but this could be the implication. Why? Is because everything that happens wrong in life happens because of ignorance. And when we learn how to do something correctly according to the Sharia, we come into the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we come into the barakah of that action. And so they would say that your istiqamah or your uprightness lies in sitting in a circle of knowledge every single day. And in the past, all the masajid had to have circles of knowledge. There had to be, every single masjid had to have a circle of knowledge or circles of knowledge. So after Fajr or after Maghrib and Isha, and those that were free, it would happen during the day, before Dhuhr, after Dhuhr, before Asr, after Asr. So if you are working, you come after Maghrib, you go to the masjid, you get your lesson for the day. If after Maghrib was too early, after Isha, you get your lesson for the day. The scholars were free. This was their duty. The duties of the scholar was to teach. In the past, they would sit from after Ishraq right up until Dhuhr. And in Hudaydah, in Yemen, and in the north of Yemen, and also in Tarim, this was sometimes the practice. They would sit, sometimes even some big mashayikh, they'd be in the 40s and 50s, but they'll sit with children who are still learning how to recite the Quran. They'll sit in one position from the time of Ishraq right up until Dhuhr. And one by one, they teach the students that would come. After Dhuhr, they'd go, they'd take lunch, have a small break, small nap, and then they come and sit again all the way up until Asr. After Asr, do the adhkar for Asr, sit all the way up until Maghrib. Then between Maghrib and Isha, they'll only go home when 1 hour after Isha. So every masjid had a teacher that was dedicated to that masjid. Whoever wanted to learn at any time of the day, they would find this teacher there. This is why the Ummah became a knowledge society. And this is why, because knowledge was spread. It came to a point where even the women that would serve in the houses, the servants, they would have on their tongues memorized entire treatises on fiqh. They would say the woman also that would be cooking bread. They'd be cooking bread, but they'd be reading the poem, the Zubad. The Zubad is an entire fiqh book written in a poetic form. And so the maid servants, when they were even, bringing up children and teaching or dressing the children, they'd be mentioning all these lines of poetry. And so the children, they wouldn't have reached the age of 10 and 15 years old, except that they had already memorized a lot of this work. In fact, in Mauritania, the parents have a very specific way at each age of the child. So, for example, the first few months when the child starts to understand, they read to them the Quran all the time. And then at a different age, certain lines of poetry all the time. Sometimes they would even test the children in a certain way, and they would ask them questions about certain fiqh masail, which the child would not understand, but just to shake the child's imagination. And then they would allow the child to memorize just reading. So if every day, if you getting your children ready and while they're dressing, or while you're cooking food and while they're eating, you have, for example, Surah Yasin being played. After a few months, they're going to memorize Surah Yasin. Okay, so they would make use of even the free time that children had to ensure that they would memorize, because every single moment in their childhood is something that they could learn and memorize. And so they would try to use all of those times. Getting Habib Salim al-Shatri, just in the time, he used to be in a wheelchair, and it would take him a long time to get out of the wheelchair and into the car. It would take a whole 5 minutes. He used to tell us he has a special wird which he reads just in getting into the car. He would say that when he enters his house, he would have a pedestal with a book. As he entered his house, he would just open and read one page, just one page, and then he'd go into the house. And after a while, one page became 2 pages. And he says he never used to go more than 5 minutes every day. Enters the house, just read, and then go. That was just his by the way reading. He says, I completed volumes upon volumes upon volumes of books over the years just in doing that. What then about the time that he actually made to sit with his books for an hour at a time every single day? So this dedication and this discipline that we have with our ibadah, with our salah, and with our Quran recitation and with our dhikr, we have to have the same discipline with knowledge, because knowledge is the essence. Imam al-Ghazali, in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he said, seeking knowledge is more virtuous than supererogatory worship. And the Prophet said, Al-alimu فوق العابد فضل العالم على العابد كفضلي على أدناكم. The virtue of a scholar in comparison to those who worship, meaning those people who just do ibadah and worship, the virtue of the scholar over the worshipper is like the virtue of myself over you. Meaning, when you start entering into the arena of knowledge, you now move into the proximity of the stations of prophethood. You will never attain prophethood, but you will be able to get as close to anyone. So a person who worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala day and night, and he performs 1,000 rak'at of salah, and he reads the Quran, he reads 10 juz, but someone who is reading a book of fiqh, trying to understand the rules of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this person has more virtue in the eyes of Allah than the other one. And this is the sira', this is the battle that a student of knowledge and a worshipper always has. You will always find yourself, once you start taking the path of knowledge, being pulled between wanting to do lots of worship and wanting to do lots of knowledge. And what usually happens with the students is some go on the avenue of knowledge and they spend all the time with the books. They don't read their Quran, they don't do their dhikr, because the knowledge itself has a sweetness and an intoxication. When you really start connecting to the books, you don't want to leave the books. But ibadah and worship also has that. When you start doing ibadah and worship, you don't want to do anything else. You can't even open a book. You'll find that opening a book is like spoiling your state. But the scholars would say, take from knowledge such that your worship does not suffer, and take from worship such that your knowledge does not suffer. So they have to be done together. And if they're done together, then there's a balance in our life, in our understanding, in our emotions, and in the way we actually view life. Okay, because the Quran and the Sharia is there meant to mold our minds and mold our understanding in how to look at life. So for example, when we hear things, when scholars or people who claim to be scholars say certain things, and you mention things about, for example, the economic situation in the world today and what's happening in the end of times, and this and that, how do you judge that? You have to have a base, and that base is a knowledge base founded in the Quran and found in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. If we live our lives and we die, and we haven't yet even understood, I won't even say the Sihah Sitta, which are the 6 books of hadith, or even all the other books of hadith, but just the Riyadh al-Salihin. Meaning, the Prophet ﷺ, when he lived on this earth, he spoke certain things. And he spoke a hadith which taught us each and every single aspect of our lives. We have to think, how can I pass away and die, and I haven't actually learned all that which the Prophet ﷺ came, the objective of his life was to teach us that which came off his tongue. Can I die and I don't even know what he taught me with regards to life, with regards to worship, with regards to business, with regards to relationships? And the scholars have made life very, very, very easy for us. All we need to do is to dedicate a little time every day, we say half an hour every day, and start going through these books with someone who has also studied and who has these changed to the Prophet ﷺ. And if you take it on a day by day basis, Allah then puts barakah in your time and He puts barakah in your life. You can see very, very quickly your mind starts opening up, your heart starts opening up. And also what you would have been doing which required a long time, you're able to start doing it in a very short space of time. So inshallah tomorrow we'll be starting with the Risalat al-Jami'ah. The Risalat al-Jami'ah was written on the madhab of Imam Shafi'i, but alhamdulillah there are scholars that have written and copied the same style on the Hanafi madhab. So we'll read the book explaining both madhabs. Then with regards to spiritual purification, we have a choice. We can either do the Risalat al-Mu'awana, the book of assistance of Imam al-Haddad, or we can do the Bidayat al-Hidayah of Imam al-Ghazali. Bidayat al-Hidayah is the beginning of guidance. Imam Ghazali says this is the beginning of the path. And then with regards to the da'wah, there are many books that have been written. You can choose. One of the books is Habib Umar's Maqasid al-Halaqat, which talks about the objectives of why we have these circles of learning, which is also in these other short primers that have been written with regards to da'wah. So inshallah, not more than half an hour every day. At this time, 9:30 every evening. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us tawfiq, to grant us istiqamah. If we have traveled as well, then the hope is maybe we can even continue these lessons online, either via Zoom or via. So we make an intention now that this is going to be a journey of learning till the day we die. And whoever makes one good intention, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens up 70 doors of tawfiq for him. So no matter where we are, we have to try every single day to continue with this lessons, inshallah. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر